Windows XP, the operating system that marked a new beginning for Microsoft. With the departure of the aging Windows 9X theme and codebase, Microsoft planned to bring an all-new experience to computer users around the world, much like they did with Windows 95. But how did it all start? What was the development process like behind the scenes for Windows XP? The development of Windows XP actually started way back in 1999, only a year after Windows 98's release. At that time, Microsoft was working on two independent new versions of Windows, codenamed Neptune and Odyssey. Odyssey was planned to be the next business version of Windows after Windows 2000, and Neptune was planned to be the next consumer version of Windows after ME. The difference this time around was that both versions of Windows would be based on the more reliable Windows NT kernel. While this was nothing new for the business side of things, it marked a new beginning for consumers, as previous consumer versions of Windows had been based on the ever-aging Windows 9X kernel. This means that Neptune would finally kill off the Windows 9X and DOS era of home computing. By the turn of the century, however, Microsoft's view of Neptune and Odyssey slightly changed. It was evident that having two separate development teams work on two independent projects was counterproductive. It was decided that the development teams would merge, killing off the Neptune and Odyssey codenames in favor of a new approach, codenamed Whistler. Whistler would operate as a single version of Windows, but with a home and professional edition, which was a first for the Windows operating system. Both editions of Whistler would be developed by the same group of people, allowing them to work more closely together during development. Ultimately, Whistler became Windows XP and was released in 2001 as the OS we know today. But in today's video, I wanted to take a closer look at the development of Windows XP. I'll be taking you through some of the most notable builds and showing you the major changes that occurred during development. So here we are, we're going to jump right in and take a look at Microsoft Neptune build 5111 here. Now, I was actually kind of debating whether or not to even include the build of Neptune in this video, because it's not really like a Windows Whistler build by any means, but this is still a vital part of the Windows XP development process, and you could really consider this to be the earliest build of Windows XP in a sort of sense. I mean, the core idea of what was to become Windows XP was here in this build, because this was essentially, as I said in that little intro clip, this was going to be the first version of Windows NT that was going to be targeted at the home and consumer market rather than the business market. I mean, they were working on the Odyssey project at the same time, but that was going to be kind of like a whole separate project that was going to be developed by completely different people than Neptune. And they later got the idea to kind of just merge Neptune and Odyssey together into what would become Whistler, and Whistler would become XP. So so Neptune and Odyssey kind of play the early beginning portion of the XP development process. So that's why that I kind of figured that we should just very briefly talk about this. I have done a couple of Windows Neptune videos on my channel before, but mainly I do want to focus in this clip right here on a couple of things, and you're going to kind of see me go through that. I'm not really going to be spending that much time on all of these builds really, because similar to the Windows Vista dev timeline, I kind of want to try to keep just talk about the main changes and the core changes, like the big things that have changed from build to build, and not really talk about all of the little minor things, so that we can kind of go through this sort of brief little development time lapse. This might end up being a two-part video like the Vista one was, but we're just going to be seeing how it goes. So Neptune here, as you can see, looks almost identical at first glance, besides the fact that they've changed all the logos to Microsoft Neptune. It pretty much looks like Windows 2000, and that was something that they were doing because obviously this is such an early build. Essentially all they were really doing was getting the NT foundation there. And we're going to actually bump this up to 1920 by 1080. But as I mentioned, that they did do a fair amount of other things. A lot of them were not finished even in this build, and there was never, this was the only Neptune build that we know of. You know, there may have been other ones that they were planning on, you know, sending out, and there may have been even Odyssey builds, but this is the only build that was ever publicly sent out to Microsoft developers and, you know, Microsoft beta testers. So to kind of show you the, you know, like some of the changes that they've done in here, the first thing we're going to do is go into the Windows control panel. And you'll see here that it does look very similar to the Windows 2000 one. You know, it has like the same you know, design and everything, but there's this new icon down here for the Windows identities, and this is sort of a beta, or you could probably even say alpha version of the Windows user accounts, which are still in Windows today, obviously. But this is kind of, you know, them trying, or, you know, Microsoft essentially trying to make it easier for multiple home users to use one computer, and you would have different Windows identities, or as they would later be called in XP, user accounts. Because, you know, Windows NT up to this point, the only way to sign in, you would have to use the you know, classic login box. You'd have to type in your name and your password, which could be something that, you know, like you know, novice computer user might not know how to do. You know, like they might find that, you know, somewhat confusing. So this was essentially, you know, designed to make that easier, as if you actually go to the welcome screen here, which if I just go to log off of my user account, you'll see that, you know, it's like a basic little thing, and you can just choose your, you know, name, and there's a you know, guest account on here as well. But you would basically, you know, choose your name, and then it would prompt you once you click on your name to enter your password if you have one. Now, this design here already, to me, looks very similar to some of the later Whistler designs that we're going to be taking a look at, and you guys can judge for yourself if you think that it does as well. But so yeah, I'm just gonna log back in here, but I just did want to show that. But that's kind of a early working concept of the, you know, like user accounts. Obviously, you could have more than one Windows user on a computer, but the only way to log in is you would have to sign out and you know, like erase your name from the username box and type in the other user's name. And that's how it was done for years on Windows NT operating systems. So this was essentially them trying to, again, make it more personal, you know, easier for people to use. And you could do, like, you know, the same options. You could change your you know, like user account picture. They have like a few default ones in here. You can change your name, your account type. Now, the account types are a little bit different in here as well. There's owner, adult, child, and guest. And in Windows XP, I believe that there were only like two. There was administrator and limited, and then there was like the guest account. So they've added this sort of adult and child thing here. And this is kind of for if you want to add like somebody else that, you know, would know how to use the you know, computer and everything, but you wouldn't want to give them access to do everything. You would make them an adult account. And then you have a child account, which is essentially for people who, as it says, you know, for children who should be monitored, and, you know, you don't want them, you know, doing things like deleting system files. And, you know, it also, I think, lets you set limits here. It says you can have a limited computer usage time. And there's also an extremely early version of auto update, or Windows update, which would be in Windows XP as well. This doesn't work at all in this build, but essentially this was, you know, in Windows XP, as I'm sure we all know, there's an option in the Windows control panel to where you can automatically install updates. And this was kind of, you know, where that feature, I guess, was, you know, first added. It was first added here in Microsoft Neptune. So something that I do briefly want to touch on here, and this doesn't really relate to Windows XP's development really at all, but it's just a feature that I feel like I should mention, because if the Neptune and Odyssey projects like never merged, if they kind of went the course that they were originally going to go, you know, this interface right here, which is called the activity centers, could have made its way into whatever the consumer or home edition of Windows XP ended up being called. Whether that was, you know, whether that they chose Windows XP Home, whether that they named it Windows Neptune or Windows 2001, or, you know, whatever they decided to call it. But The reason why that I want to mention this is because, it's just an interesting user interface. It's something that never really saw the light of day outside of Microsoft, and it's essentially an experimental user interface that was designed to make it easier for people to launch, their most commonly used programs and things like that. And you could, customize this, to your liking. I've done a whole in-depth video on this about 3 years ago, so it is a bit old. It's in a bit of an older style, but if you do want to see that, I'll have a link on screen and you can go check it out down below in the video description if you want to see more about this. But I'm not going to really be spending that much time on it in this video, because I do want to take a look at, some of the other builds. I don't know why it's not letting me shut down. Oh, it wants to enter hibernation by default. That's right. So we're just gonna have to go and manually shut it off. So for the next build on our list, we're gonna be taking a look at an actual Windows Whistler build, and this right here is build 2211, and this build has a BIOS date of March 10th, 2000. So this was actually released literally a couple months after the build that we just took a look at. So yeah, you kind of see here that, a couple of things. It's still calling itself Windows 2000 Pro, and during the entire setup process, I obviously am not going to show that because it's pretty boring and it looks like a Windows 2000 setup process. And there's not really any indication that this is an actual XP beta or Whistler beta. The only indication at first glance is the little watermark down here at the bottom, and you'll see here that it's calling itself Whistler Windows 2001 Professional, which is kind of like a few key things here. We see that it's got 2001, which to me means that they were that was going to be their projected release date, as it has the build or the year in there, 2001. Now, it wasn't 2001 when this build came out. And it has Whistler before Windows, which this is the only build I believe to have that. I'm not sure if that was like a formatting error or if that was meant to be that way, but yeah, it says Whistler Windows. And in all future builds after this, it says Windows Whistler. So it's kind of backwards here. And yeah, the reason why that I'm showing this build is because there are a few minor changes in things like the Windows control panel, but the main reason that I'm showing it is because this is the first, or well, one of the first Windows Whistler builds. So let's just do a WinVer here, and I'll show you that this is still NT 5.0. You can see that I spelled my name wrong during setup. But yeah, it's build 2211, and this is an evaluation copy that expires May 28th, 2001. It's still calling itself Windows 2000, obviously. So we're just going to go into settings here. The main thing that has changed is this right here, the Windows control panel. Windows 2000's control panel did not look like this. It was more, it didn't have this, category view really at all. You would open it, it would just show all the icons. It would look pretty much like this. That's how the Windows 2000, control panel looked. But you'll see here that, it's got these like new graphics on the side, and I do believe that these are actually taken from Windows ME, if I'm not mistaken. These are because I do believe that Windows ME's control panel looks very similar to this, if not exactly like it. And there are actually in this build a few remnants of Windows Neptune. One of those is going to be in the File a Bug Report application right here. And this is essentially the same program, and I didn't show it in the Windows Neptune build, but you can see right here, report a bug to the Windows Neptune beta team. This was not changed since the Windows Neptune build. It still has a copyright date of 1999. I want to say that Windows 2000 didn't have this like whole graphic thing on here. I'm not sure if it did. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think this was like an ME only thing, like all these colorful graphics. And these I do believe were in Neptune as well. So that was something that they kept from Windows Neptune. So it's showing that a lot of the stuff was kept from Windows Neptune. But yeah, that is really the only notable changes in this build. Again, you know, I'm trying to spend a brief amount of time on these builds here because I do only want to talk about kind of the major design changes, the major features that are kind of worth showing on video. So yeah, that is build 2211 here. So we're just gonna go ahead and move on to Whistler 2257. So let's just shut this down here. So Whistler 2257 actually, you know, for the setup process, actually had a more Windows ME style setup. But there is also a new boot screen as well. And by a new boot screen, I just mean like a rebadged Windows 2000 boot screen that they changed to say Microsoft codename Whistler, as you can see right here. But, you know, it is technically a new boot screen. I mean, they haven't really done much to it, but they're getting the whole naming scheme in place. So that is definitely a good thing. And this is also the first personal build of, and you can see we have the nice new welcome screen here instead of the old classic login box. And you can see, as I was saying, from Windows Neptune that, you know, does it look kind of similar? I mean, I think it looks kind of similar with the, you know, blue bar on the side and everything. We still have the Windows 2000 sounds, obviously, but as I was saying, this is the first personal build of Windows Whistler to leak. And because, as I was saying in that intro clip, you know, what they were doing when they merged Neptune and Odyssey was they were essentially going to bring the, you know, professional edition of Windows and the home edition into one release, but have two separate editions that would be kind of under the same Windows you know, release. And so there was going to be, and you know, Microsoft was, you know, planning for this ever since they merged Neptune and Odyssey, but there was going to be a personal build, or not build, but a personal edition of Whistler or XP, and a professional edition. Now the personal was changed to the home edition, but during you know, development and testing, it was called personal edition, as you can see right here. Now this build does contain the very nice watercolor theme. Now during this build's you know, development, it was called the professional theme, as you can see here, but they essentially changed the name of the professional theme to the watercolor theme in a few builds down the road. And a lot of people really liked this theme when they first you know, introduced it, as this gets away with the old, you know, Windows 2000 and really Windows 9X theme, as Windows 2000 and Windows ME really kept the same theme as Windows like 95 had. It was just slightly modified to, you know, like have, like, you know, some of the windows were different, some of the, you know, graphics were slightly changed and added, but the theme, you know, like at the core of the theme, it was essentially the same thing. Well, this was the first time since Windows 95 that Microsoft had really done a whole theme overhaul, and a lot of people really like this. I myself am a big fan of this theme. I thought this was a really cool theme when they first introduced it. But this would obviously, as we're going to see in like the next couple of builds, this would be changed out with the Luna theme that Windows XP ultimately ended up having in 2001 on its release day. And a lot of people, you know, there were some people that liked that theme, and there were some people that were very critical of that theme, and they said that, you know, they wanted the watercolor theme instead. And they kind of wondered why Microsoft didn't keep the watercolor theme as an option, or, you know, have it as the default option. But, you know, for whatever reason that it was, they ended up, you know, completely scrapping this theme as well. But a lot of people really liked it, and again, as I said, I really like the, you know, design of this theme as well. But we're just going to do a WinVer here, and you can see that they've changed a few of the actual dialog boxes now. They, you know, this one here says codename Whistler. It's still version, well, actually it's version 5.1 now. I do believe it was version 5.0 in the last build that we took a look at, but it's version 5.1, which was Windows XP's NT version or build 2257, and I spelled my name correctly this time. And really kind of the like main feature of this build is the watercolor theme and the watercolor start menu. There's actually a previous build that I was going to include in this video, but it had the watercolor theme and everything, but it still had the classic start menu. And that's why that I ended up, including this theme. But you can see that the, watercolor or the, professional theme start menu here is starting to take shape, or starting to kind of form the final Windows XP start menu. Now, obviously, before this, the start menu in Windows 95 through 2000 and ME was only one column, and you had all of your list of programs, and then you had your pinned applications up here, or whatever that I believe you could pin like applications to the top of it. But here, they were actually starting to change that, and you could have pinned applications to the top here, which by default is internet and email, and then you could have your recently used applications. And then they had this other column, which would be for, like your folders, shortcuts to like my computer and my network places, and some, most commonly accessed things like the control panel and the run box. And if you go into more programs, you can see all the programs on your computer, which you can see here isn't really that much. This more programs would be changed to all programs in Windows XP, and it does give you this like little notice here. As you begin to use this computer, your most frequently used programs will show up in this list, which is something that Windows XP did. And if we go into my computer here, you can see that this got a little overhaul here as well. This looks nothing like it did before, so they were kind of starting to change this as well. We kind of have the drives and everything set up into different categories now. We have the local drive in its own category, we have removable media in its own category, and then we have some file folders right here. Now, if you recall before, Windows 2000 and most other versions of Windows before it, it would just kind of be laid out in like columns here, and we go local disk A. Well, actually, it would start with the floppy drive A, and then if you had like a second floppy drive B, then the local disk C, then the D drive, and then it would go on for how many drives you had in your system, and then it would show like the actual file folders. But this kind of splits it up into separate categories, which would make it easier for people to access like their hard drive and things like that. And if we actually, well, see, that's kind of weird. See, if we go into the hard drive, it goes back to the old browser. So I guess that it was really only like the My Computer thing that was changed, as you can see here. So yeah, that's pretty much all that was changed. Another program, or folder, I guess, that got a sort of overhaul is the control panel. You can see that the graphics and the icons and everything have been changed to kind of fit the watercolor, or the, at this time, the professional theme a little bit better. Most of these, like if you actually go into these, I think, well, except for this one here, but we'll get into that in a minute. But most of these, I think, if you go in here, they're going to kind of look like the same, classic pop-out menus here. You do see that we have the option again for user accounts. This was not here in the last build that we saw. But yeah, this is kind of going back to Windows Neptune with, trying to make the, welcome screen and everything easier for, consumer users. And since this is the personal build of Windows Whistler, it's kind of the reason why that they have this in here. There is a, professional build of this build, I guess, or a, professional edition of this build. And it does not have this. I do not believe that it has this, because there's really no need to, because you would manage all of your users through the classic login box and everything like that. So we can still go in, like, let's say we want to change my account type, and you can see that we only have the two owner and limited. So the owner, adult child thing is all gone now. We just have owner and limited, which is what Windows XP had. I believe owner was administrator though, which isn't really that big of a change. And the overall, general design of it is a little bit different than XP's, but that kind of goes hand in hand with the watercolor theme. This is something that they were kind of trying to make this to match the, like the watercolor theme. And once that got changed to the Luna theme, then they kind of had to overhaul all of these applets and the control panel and everything once again. But that is essentially a brief look at this build right here. This is build 2257 or 2257 once again. So we're just going to shut this down. There is actually a very nice new shutdown dialog box here, so we'll just turn that off. Okay, so for the next build that we're going to be taking a look at, we were going to be diving into Whistler build 2296. But, however, there were a few issues with me actually getting that working. It was actually freezing and giving me a few errors during setup. So we're actually going to be skipping over that build, but essentially some of the notable things in that build was that it was the only beta 1 build of Codename Whistler that we know of, and it had a new style setup. It was kind of trying to get away from the Windows ME and Windows 2000 style setup, with a setup that kind of looks like the Watercolor theme almost. And there's also a new welcome screen. But for the actual, demo here, we're going to be taking a look at Whistler build 2419, which is actually the same build that I demoed in my very first Windows Beta build tutorial video that I made probably about 4 to 5 years ago. So you can tell how old that was, but that was what kind of started me getting into making beta builds on this channel. This was the last build to use the Watercolor theme, and it was called the Watercolor theme in this build. But after this build, the next build introduced the Luna theme, which would be Windows XP's final theme. And there's also a new setup user interface, even from the beta 1 build that I just talked about. I will show a brief little video here of the setup interface, but it's actually starting to take the shape of the final Windows XP setup. Like it has like the same background and everything, and kind of the same design. The only difference is that it does look slightly different. There's like some of the colors on the left side are a little bit different. That text I think is like green during the Windows XP setup, and it does have the old logo. So that is something there. And there is also probably one of the major things is there is an out-of-box experience, and I'm not going to be able to show that for you live here, but I did take again like a brief little video of it. Again, it's kind of beginning to take shape. It's beginning to become the Windows XP out-of-box experience. But yeah, that is what the out-of-box experience was like. But now we're just actually going to be jumping into build 2419 here. This is a pre-beta 2 build. This build has a BIOS date of January 14th, 2001. You can see that it has a very nice boot screen. One of the things that I said in my original tutorial video is that I really like this boot screen, and of course the Watercolor theme and everything. And I can see why a lot of people were really confused when Microsoft, shifted away from the design that they were going for at this time. They kind of did a total change, 180, whatever that you want to call it, and they kind of confused people because a lot of people were really like they really liked the Watercolor theme and the nice multicolored boot screen and everything, but all that was changed in favor of the Luna theme and the boot screen that we saw in XP. But I'm going to actually change this to 1920 by 1080 here. So mainly a few things that I want to talk about here. There's a few like major talking points in this build. One of the things is the newer Watercolor start menu here. Now, if you remember from the last build, the start menu looked a little bit different. It was still kind of had this same design, like the same 2-column layout. But this one here is starting to even more take the shape of Windows XP. This one, to me at least, looks even more like the 2-column layout start menu that Windows XP had, with the Luna theme, obviously. And this one, again, it has your pinned applications up here. You can see that we actually have the subtext thing there, which we didn't have in the previous build. It has the same thing where it builds a list of your recent programs, and we have some new icons that are starting to take shape as well. Some of the icons have been changed as well, and they're more 3D looking. In the previous build, they were kind of more flat, more 2D. They still look nice in my opinion, but they were of a completely different design. These are more 3D, and this is the ultimate design that they went for with Windows XP. In the control panel here, you can see that they have removed the like multicolored graphics on like the sides here. It's just kind of like a plain black text on a white background style thing. So obviously there was improvement to be done here, which we'll see how it is in the next build. There's also a new Windows Tor prototype in this, and the Windows Tor was in Windows XP. It was something that would pop up, I think, when you first launched Windows XP. It would kind of say, like down here, someone would pop up and say, take a tour of, Windows XP, see what we've changed, look at all the new features. And you could go for an animated tour, which would kind of have like a, like background voiceover, and it would be, telling you all the new features, like a, basically like an interactive tour. Or if your computer couldn't support that, you could go for an HTML, web-based tour. And I believe in here somewhere the Tor is actually in here. So this is the Tor application right here, and it is, and I have seen this before, this is a very interesting Tor. It's not really a Tor at all, it's just kind of a bunch of things thrown together. As you can see here, it's just kind of like a test, I guess you could say, to see how that the Flash player and everything works with all these like elements on the screen. There's a link down here that just opens up like the Windows help. So yeah, that's the Tor. I mean, it's like nothing huge, but it is there. This is the Tor. I think it would be in the same C Windows help Tor directory. This is where it would be in the final build. Or in the final release. And just one last little point of discussion here in build 2419. If we actually go into the display properties dialog box here, and if we go over to the appearance tab, there is actually a whole new theme. Besides the Watercolor and Windows Classic theme, there is also this theme called Sample Text Visual Style. Now, this was not in the previous build that we just took a look at, but it does look to be, as you can see here, something completely different, something that is not even like the Watercolor theme. And I'm not sure if this was something that Microsoft was, testing, if they were testing the, theme engine, or maybe if they were like experimenting with this theme here. But you can see that it looks totally different. It's got these like kind of interesting looking circle buttons that kind of pop out of the actual window up here. And yeah, it just looks, totally different than even of the Watercolor theme. We have gone back in this theme to the what almost looks like the XP classic theme start menu, which this kind of resembles that right here. But I just wanted to point that out. I don't think that this theme is in any of like the other builds, but you can see here that there is this like other color scheme called Blue Lagoon. And if we change it to that, it's essentially the same theme with a different color palette essentially. So we're just going to change this back to the Watercolor theme, and you can see that there is only like one actual color scheme here. And yeah, that is essentially all of the major changes and the major talking points in build 2419. And I think that is going to end it off for this first video here. Now, as I've been saying throughout this video, I don't really want to spend so much time at taking a look at these builds. I mean, I could do like a whole 30-minute video on just one of these builds and go through every little thing that has changed, but I figured that would be pretty boring to for you guys to watch. And so, what I, just essentially decided to do was to, do something similar to what I did with the, Windows Vista series, and kind of go through a brief little build time lapse here and make that into, this is probably gonna be like a 30-35 minute video. And for those of you who have watched all of this, thank you very much for watching. And in part 2 of this video, like little mini series here, we're probably going to be taking a look at the post watercolor theme builds, when they got rid of the watercolor theme and when they were moving into the Luna theme. And we're going to be taking a look at, that pretty much to the RTM, the, release to manufacturing of Windows XP, and seeing what has changed up until then. So that is going to be what we're doing in the next video. And if you guys, enjoyed this video, if you want to see that, next video, definitely be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments below, what you think of these builds, what you think of this video style. I always, appreciate your guys' feedback and what you guys have to say, as it really does help me when I'm making these videos. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of your amazing support here on the channel, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.